What comes to mind when you think of Buddhist temples? Silent prayer, monks in meditation, solemn chanting of sutra. But in the shadows of the halls of medieval temples, different scenes unfolded. Monks carrying naginata swords, clashing steel, war cries, and the thunder of marching feet. These were no ordinary monks. They were the Sohei, Japan's warrior monks, guardians, rebels, and sometimes tyrants. Konnichiwa. Welcome to another journey into the history of Japan. Today, we look at Sohei, the warrior monks who even intimidated the imperial court and the powerful daimyo of medieval Japan. Buddhism arrived in Japan in the mid-6th century from the Korean kingdom of Baekje. In its earliest stage, in the Asuka period, Buddhism was the symbol of the advanced culture, philosophy, and technology of the Asian mainland. And of course, they had absolutely nothing to do with soldiers or armies. But the turning point came in the Heian period. As the state's land control under the ritual system disintegrated, powerful nobles began to amass privately owned land estates known as shoen, and so did the temples. Shoen estates generated rice and other agricultural products, which became the main source of income for aristocrats and temples. In addition, shoen allowed economic and political autonomy because they were exempt from state oversight and tax. Thus, shoen became synonymous with wealth and political power. However, as the estates expanded, they needed to defend themselves against the bandits, local warlords, government officials, and rival temples. Thus emerged the Sohei, or warrior monks, not just spiritual men, but a military force. A Sohei typically wore clerical robe over armor, covered his head with sacred cowl known as kato, wore takageta, high wooden clogs, and carried naginata, a pole-arm weapon with a long curved blade at the end of a wooden pole. They became symbols of both protection and terror in medieval Japan, and the temple transformed from a center of faith into an armed power. Sohei warrior monks were found in temples across Japan, but let me introduce two of the most notable ones. The most famous one was Enryaku-ji Temple on Mount Hiei, located to the northeast of Kyoto, the ancient capital of Japan. The temple was founded in 788 by priest Saicho and became the headquarters temple of Tendai sect of Buddhism. And it is the birthplace of the earliest Sohei. By the 11th century, the temple had amassed vast shoen land holdings and political clout, prompting the need for armed defense against rival temples and secular encroachment. And the temple had thousands of Sohei, forming a formidable army. The warrior monks of Enryaku-ji were known as Yamaboshi, literally mountain monks, because the temple was located on the Mount Hiei. They didn't just guard their shoen estates. They were particularly infamous for staging goso. Goso was militant protest where they marched into Kyoto bearing sacred objects like mikoshi, a portable shrine in which the deity is believed to reside. These processions were acts of intimidation, leveraging the sacredness of the mikoshi to pressure the government into granting demands such as land rights, tax exemptions, or favorable appointments. Those goso protests were often successful because the court nobles feared the spiritual consequences of disrespecting a mikoshi, as well as the real threat of violence from armed monks. The cloistered emperor Shirakawa, the most powerful man through the late 11th to the early 12th century Japan, cited only three things beyond his control: They were the water of the Kamo River that runs through the city of Kyoto, the roll of the dice, and the Yamaboshi, or the warrior monks of Enryaku-ji Temple. It is a statement to Shirakawa's immense power. He could control everything except for nature, chance, and religion, but it also highlights the violent nature of the Sohei monks. And rivalries erupted between temples. The most fierce battles were fought between Enryaku-ji and Onjo-ji, also known as Miidera, two temples that share their ancestry. The renowned priest Saicho, after his death, factional fighting arose between the followers of two prominent priests, Ennin and Enchin. The disciples of Enchin moved to Onjo-ji Temple at the eastern foot of Mount Hiei, while the followers of Ennin remained at Enryaku-ji on Mount Hiei. Though both temples follow Tendai teachings, doctrinal and political differences emerged. Their rivalry intensified, and warrior monks of the two temples clashed repeatedly, burning each other's halls, raiding estates, and killing each other's monks. The hostility continued into the Kamakura and Muromachi period, with both temples allying with different political factions. Enryaku-ji even rivaled feudal lords. They fought and formed alliances with Sengoku daimyo. Enryaku-ji's location near Kyoto gave it strategic control over access to the capital, making it a valuable ally or dangerous enemy for any daimyo seeking influences. And the temple's religious prestige also meant that alliances with it could lend legitimacy to a daimyo's rule, especially in the early Sengoku period, when Buddhist institutions still held sway over public morality and ritual. However, one daimyo brought about the downfall of Enryaku-ji. His name was Oda Nobunaga. The conflict between Enryaku-ji and Nobunaga began in 1569 when Nobunaga extorted the temple's estates to curb its power. In response, Enryaku-ji supported his enemies, including the Azai and Asakura clans. The temple provided them with refuge and logistical support. Nobunaga first attempted to negotiate with Enryaku-ji, offering to return the extorted estates if they cooperated. But the temple rejected these overtures, prompting Nobunaga to act decisively and ruthlessly. Nobunaga's siege of Mount Hiei is remembered as one of the most brutal acts of atrocities on a religious institution in Japanese history. Nobunaga ordered his retainer Akechi Mitsuhide to lay siege to Mount Hiei, home to the Enryaku-ji temple. He encircled the monastery with 30,000 troops and set fire on the mountain. The entire mountain was engulfed in flames. The temple buildings were burnt down. Furthermore, Nobunaga's army beheaded not only monks but also women and children on sight, resulting in the deaths of approximately 3,000 to 4,000 people. Black smoke reportedly rose from Mount Hiei for 4 days after it was set ablaze. The massacre earned Nobunaga the moniker of the Demon King. 11 years after Nobunaga's siege of Mount Hiei, he was assassinated by Akechi Mitsuhide, the very retainer who had been ordered by Nobunaga to attack Enryaku-ji. His successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, permitted the reconstruction of Enryaku-ji, but with one condition: the temple would not house any Sohei warrior monks. Another famous temple with prominent Sohei army was Negoro-ji Temple in Ki Province. By the 16th century, Negoro-ji had grown into a vast religious and military hub with over 2,700 sub-temples, and a population of thousands of monks and lay followers. The temple was affiliated with the Shingon sect of Buddhism, but its influence extended far beyond religious practice. after the firearms arrived in Japan from Europe in 1543, Negoro became one of the country's production centers of matchlock guns. Thus, unlike most other Sohei army who fought with naginata and swords, the Negoro Sohei were heavily armed with matchlock guns, making them one of the most formidable forces of their time. They were often hired as mercenaries by feudal lords and participated in major battles. And unlike Enryaku-ji, Negoro-ji was allied with Nobunaga and aided him with his national unification efforts. However, following Nobunaga's death in 1582, his successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, turned against Negoro-ji. Following fierce fighting, the Negoro-ji was burnt down, and its Sohei monks and other local forces in the key province were subjugated by Hideyoshi's army. Survivors scattered. Some joined Tokugawa Ieyasu and served as gunners in his army, playing an active role in the Battle of Sekigahara, while others became retainers in various domains. The age of Sohei was ending. Naginata and matchlock guns were no longer monks' tools by the end of the Sengoku period. With the end of the Sengoku period, the Sohei disappeared. Temples returned to being peaceful, serene places of prayer. But the legacy of Sohei remains. They were more than fighters. They were symbols of a nation where the sacred and the profane walked side by side. And their story raises timeless questions. Can violence ever serve peace? Is killing ever justified in the name of religion? Thanks for watching. If you found the story of warrior monks compelling, please like, subscribe, and share. ありがとうございました。さようなら。